Hi, and welcome to the next episode of Belly to Belly. And we're here with great friend Adam.cruickshank from Venture HR. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, my good man. It's been a lovely long weekend, and emails never wait. So it's been kind of a busy catch up, but it's great.
Yeah, that's good. Awesome. So our audience are companies who are either in the US and expanding or offshore and coming into the US and expanding. And I certainly want to learn about best practices in terms of hiring and building your team and all that. Before we do, it'd be great if you wouldn't mind just take a moment and introduce our audience to Venture HR and let us know what you do, and then we can hop into our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So Adam.cruickshank, a Scotsman that moved to the US 6 years ago, just before COVID. And like a lot of you, I cannot tell you how confusing or tough it was landing, figuring out the jobs, compliance, tax, HR. Thank goodness I had a wife who was able to do my taxes for me. It is one of the toughest things I've ever had to do. And so now what I do with Venture, I'll get into that in a minute, is I help companies really understand the scope, the scale, and the challenges they're going to face hiring in the US. So Venture HR, we've been around since 2003, originally started as a staffing PEO. We are now the largest privately held PEO. We're in all 50 states. We have EOR in Canada, the US, and we're now global for payroll and EOR. Really, when we look at what we do in this conversation, the international expansion, we realize there was a big gap, right? When you expand to the US, you either have your current team, wherever in the world, to handle those employees, or you have to get a full HR suite set up in the US. We're talking 500,000 plus, right? Just salaries, benefits, compensation. So what we do is we help outsource the kind of 4 base components and then support you from there. We're talking payroll, HR, tax, and compliance. That's really the ethos and the core of what we do. On top of that then comes benefit, taxes, 401k, whether or not you'll be the employer, right? EOR versus PEO versus payroll. And from there, the final part is dedicated service, right? Like we will have service people on your time zone internationally or local in the US or a mixture of both. So it's really just supporting and taking off all that burden that's going to come with not knowing how California versus Missouri versus New York is for hiring, firing, and the likes.
Brilliant. Cool. Well, it's great to have you here, and so glad to hop into this conversation. So, the thing that is always interesting in with us about the vast majority of our clients come to us after they fail at U.S. expansion, and I think probably fairly similar to you. And so when you see where companies struggle in terms of U.S. expansion, what are the big things where you see that they're challenged by?
I think the first and most common, I mean, I'm seeing it right now, is a mixture of bringing us in too late or having unrealistic expectations. I have a client just now who is hit me up and is like, hey, I want to hire someone by Monday. We haven't gotten a single document. There's not been a conversation of salary, state, anything. It's just not possible, right? And they have an employee now who's ready to quit their job, move over. So I add stress to the employee who you've not hired yet. Add stress to the employer, working with time zones. You've already put a lot of vested effort. And then it comes to us, we can of course rush, but we want to make sure you understand, are you offering 401k? Are benefits expected by this person? Have you thought about workers' comp, payroll? Have you made sure that, have you said monthly payroll and New York has to be bi-weekly? You don't want to have those hiccups and going back to the employee each time, revising an offer letter. So the first thing is definitely starting the conversation early with a provider, even if you just use it as a consultant. I'd say that's probably about half my job is consulting, advising, and then next steps come as they do.
So what you're saying is you can't 3D print a person and put them in place. There's actually a bit of a process to deal with humans.
Agreed. And just having people, hold themselves to a realistic timeline.
Yeah.
So if you're looking to hire in the US, I'd recommend probably reaching out to somebody like myself first, scope of work, understand it. And then when you talk to an employee, you can be like, we're figuring out benefits, but we want to offer it. Or 401k, we will or won't contribute. and it'll make it so much more valuable. Like your retention will go up, you'll spend less money overall, it'll be grand.
Well, and I suppose there's stuff that companies do for administratively in their home country that they just assume because they were doing, they started probably as a one-person shop, and then maybe they brought on a partner or a team member or whatever, and then it may have been a year or a couple of years down the road they started actually hiring people, and it's much more organic than when you come into the US or expanding into other countries, where it's much more of a light switch, where you're actually kind of hiring much earlier in the cycle, and you're because you now have substance somewhere, you're coming in with a bit, a bit more impetus, and that must cause some of these frustrations or challenges.
It definitely does. Some people think, the European versus the American, even just interview style, totally different. As you from that organic maybe mom and pop shop to now being, let's say, a couple hundred employees. But in the US, people see Europe and think they don't know what they're doing. Like, I can ask for the world, and it can really throw a wrench when someone's asking for double the salary you wanted and then benefits. So it's setting that expectation early of understanding the differences.
And the U.S. being much more an employer of will, and all those, it's definitely a learning curve. With that, I have friends in the UK who've been put on gardening leave, and I had this, what is that? I don't understand what that is. That sounds really, how do you get that? That sounds good.
Like my partner was as a teacher, and so when I moved to the US, I was like, oh, I'm an at-will employee. She was like, what that? Never had to deal with it. I'm like, oh, tomorrow my boss could just be like, see ya. So understanding that is very important.
On both sides, for sure.
Right.
So thinking about the companies you work with that are super successful, obviously we're all dealing with companies that are kind of on all parts of the continuum in terms of their maturity and their readiness and so on. But thinking about the founders that are particularly successful, what are the attributes that you see that you see as a common thread in the really good, again, successful expansion founders that you work with?
It's a great one. So the first of all is flexibility, right? We all come in with obviously a goal, right? Whether that be payroll only, right? Or you want benefits or an employer of record. The first thing I've seen is people who are willing to pivot, right? They come in, they understand what they want as a core, but with so many solutions nowadays, you really have to be flexible, understanding, okay, this as a consultant, as an advisor, it's probably number one, you're wanting number three, here's the pros and cons. So being flexible in that mind. And two is holding themselves accountable. That is honestly the biggest one. I understand so well, right, that their life is so busy. You're trying to manage international, you're trying to manage the US. Setting and holding yourselves to kind of timelines, documentation is honestly the smoothest process I've ever had. Is when somebody says, you want these by Wednesday, I am committing to that, and they do it. Sometimes they'll be like, oh, I need 3, 4, 5 levels of sign off. Great, but just let us know, because if it ends up being 2 weeks down the road and we're still waiting for documents or for next steps, it's only going to make this more troublesome for you, right? So it just adds delays. So those two are definitely the strongest things I've seen with people who have had great, successful US expansions.
The sort of agile approach to sort of adjusting as you learn, we see that as well as being kind of a huge part of that, because I think Mike Tyson probably said it best, right? Everybody has a plan until they get hit in the face. That totally makes sense. That's really cool. So thinking about companies that are hiring, and maybe this is one, I think companies sort of always sort of question, kind of when to hire that first employee. And, one of the things we've seen as being really important is that a founder needs to be involved for the first phase of US expansion kind of full time. And that may be full time, but part time in the US and part time in the home country or at the home office. You know, do you see a point in time in which kind of having that first employee makes the most sense? How do you coach your clients on that?
So I'll say it depends on the product, if I'm being genuinely honest. I'll say for everyone who, you know, wants to dip a toe in the market, right? We're not looking to set up an entity and have a sales team on the ground rearing. Employer of record, sometimes they hire an analyst, a marketing person, someone to try and build that brand. But because there's no entity, the risk's a lot lower. You can try it out for 6 months, doesn't work, you end it, right? And it's a much less in-depth and expensive solution. When it's coming to more, you have an entity, it's usually the minute they have a client or several that they can either visit or build that network around. So I have a couple of, you know, moved to Texas because that's where their 2 best clients are. And once they built that, they're like, we want 2 salespeople to manage them and organically over the next 12 months grow. So I'd say it's typically that. Do you want to test and just, you know, start the US, or have you already done some work, have a couple of clients, and now you need to build and keep that maintained? Perfect. I'd say those are the 2 best ones.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, this has been so fun, Adam. I really appreciate you taking the time today. And is it okay if we share your contact details in the description below?
Yeah, please, of course. It'd be lovely. And reach out if anyone has any questions, even if it's just a, you know, how does this work or how does that work? More than happy to give you some support.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time today.
Of course. Appreciate it, Bill. Lovely as always.